I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. So, one of the topics that we have been discussing in depth since the federal election is the issue of Western separatism, Western independence. And I will say that we have been covering it more from a perspective that we find it interesting here at the Candice Malcolm Show. We're interested in the idea, not that we promote it, not that we like the idea of splitting up Canada, but we are interested in the movement. And we have been highlighting some of the other voices that have been leading this movement. People like Keith Wilson, the constitutional lawyer, who helped us break down the changes to the Citizens Initiative Act announced by Premier Danielle Smith. We've also had Premier Danielle Smith on the program, not talking about this specifically, but we also recently had Preston Manning on the show earlier this week. That episode really blew up. A lot of people are really interested in Preston's vision for the future of this country. Well, we also want to sometimes show the other side of the story, and that is why I invited Wyatt Claypool on the show today. Wyatt is a political commentator and founder of the National Telegraph. And I don't know your perspective on it per se, Wyatt, but I know that you have some concerns and some skepticism as an Albertan, as a Calgary native yourself. So I wanted to have you on today to sort of just explore the other side, the dark side of this movement, and why we should perhaps have some more caution towards it. So I'll hand it over to you, and you can explain your position.
Well, thank you for having me on to talk about this, and hopefully, I'm not going to disappoint people by sounding like, nervously pessimistic. Because, in a certain sense, my personal perspective doesn't matter. If anything, I would say I'm the most agnostic person on Western separatism as someone living in the West as you could possibly get. I really just care about the numbers. If you're going to try and do something and you want it to succeed, you should want there to be the proper, the proper soil, the infrastructure there in order to actually be able to get the victory across the finish line. And when I look at Western separatism, I'm gonna first, at least let's talk about my province of Alberta. I'm gonna look at the results for getting rid of daylight savings time. The daylight savings time referendum in Alberta failed. And now we're going to try and go for Western separatism in sort of a glory shot of only maybe a year's worth of organizing because Mark Carney got reelected as prime minister. And I hate Mark Carney. I don't like the Liberals. And you could say that in theory, it's good for Alberta to separate. It's good for Saskatchewan to separate from Canada. They get horribly mistreated. I know all of that stuff. And the thing is, whenever we start getting into, whenever you start to say it's not really feasible to actually succeed in this referendum, at least this time, people say, well, don't you know how bad things are? Like, okay, it just doesn't matter. I understand all that stuff. But whenever I look at the polling, whenever I look at just the realities on the ground of the kind of mountains you're going to have to ascend in order to win the victory, I just don't see a real path forward. I know some people in the separatist movement. I appreciate them. Even though many of them are very good at politics. But you need to have like 1,000 people around the province organizing who are fantastic at politics to get something like this across. And I don't even think at this point they maybe would even win in the rural areas at this point.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because it reminded me of the 2021 referendum that Alberta asked when it came to equalization payments. Now, in my mind, this should have been an absolute slam dunk, asking Albertans whether they want to continue to subsidize the rest of the provinces, often ones that deliberately don't develop their own natural resources and are like morally opposed to it, but they're more than happy to take the checks from Alberta. Like this should have been an 80-20 slam dunk issue. And I remember feeling like quite surprised when it came back. And so this was on October 18th, 2021. The question was, should Section 36 of the Constitution Act, Parliament and the Government Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payment be removed from the Constitution, right? And so just knowing all that background, that Alberta just pays way more. I don't have the exact numbers, but they pay billions and billions more than they get back in services every year. And that went 61% for the yes side and only 38% no. So 38% of Albertans said, no, we want to continue this deal that we get. To me, that showed that it had become like a partisan issue, right? That it was really 62% of people saying they are in agreement with the Conservative government, and then 40%, almost 40% saying that they are opposed to it, which makes me think these referendums are so politicized in Alberta that the question isn't really the question. I think that was also part of the point that you wanted to make, that when you break down who would support a vote for secession, it really goes down to partisan lines. So this is an Angus Reid poll that came out last week, Referendum Reality. Half in Alberta and Saskatchewan call for vote on independence. Fewer would actually leave. And when you look at the breakdown, this is what is super interesting, is that UCP supporters, the United Conservative Party, are kind of split, not quite split, because you still have 33% saying that they would definitely vote to leave, and then 32% leaning leave. So that's that 60% I was talking about. But then when you look at NDP voters, a full 93% say definitely would stay, right? And so somehow in Alberta, it has become like a left-right issue.
And what you would end up running into, in my opinion, is that this is going to be a really great practice of unity for the NDP in Alberta and Saskatchewan, because the numbers are pretty much the exact same as Saskatchewan between the Saskatchewan Party and the Saskatchewan NDP. It's going to be very unifying for the left, and it's going to be very divisive for the right. And not divisive for the right, but if we try hard enough, we'll be able to win. You can't win. You're not going to win the suburbs. That's the problem. Too many people who live in Alberta were not born in Alberta. They came from the east, they came from British Columbia, and they happen to like Canada. And the issue is never the issue when you have these referendums, like you're correctly pointing out about the referendum on equalization. It started becoming about, do you like Canada or do you like Alberta? Even though that's a very easy slam dunk issue that we shouldn't be subsidizing the entire province's social welfare systems and healthcare and whatnot if they can't figure out their own public finances for decades at a time. The thing is, right now we're going to be going in with a question where it is explicitly, do you want independent Alberta or do you want Canada, which is it's going to be a fairly permanent, or at least a semi-permanent decision. You're going to have a lot of retirees, a lot of upper middle class, nervous people, a lot of immigrants who are just going to vote Canada because frankly, they don't live out in rural areas where all the oil and gas work is being done, and who have experienced the kind of anti farming kind of policies of the government to support the supply management cartels out east. You're just not going to be able to do it. And my fear, again, is that in the next provincial election, this is going to be the thing that they hang around Danielle Smith's neck in order to beat her, especially if separatist parties are running in the race. It's going to be very easy for the NDP to come up the middle. In 23, with basically no other parties other than the NDP and the UCP seriously running, it came down to 1,000, 2,000 votes in Calgary that separated us from an NDP government and a UCP government. Same thing in Saskatchewan. I think it was only 500 votes in Saskatchewan, and that was all just 1 or 2 seats in Saskatoon going one way or the other would have changed everything.
It's so interesting, and you're right, it's close, it's not a slam dunk issue. I think that a lot of people in central Canada and Quebec and Ontario, they might not really know the details of, who would support a movement like this. Is it just, the hard right flank? Is there appetite for this? We had Cian Bexte on this show the other day, and he was saying that the idea in central Canada is that it's a bunch of, hillbillies and rednecks that are supporting this, whereas from his perspective, it is, the most sophisticated of business people and investors that are the most serious about this. One of the cautions that I've been hearing from people in Alberta is this Republican Party of Alberta is sort of run by maybe, I don't know, an outsider, fringe character named Cam Davies. So I want to play this clip of Cam talking about how the momentum for an Alberta Republic is growing in Calgary and Edmonton and urging Albertans to sign his petitions. Play this clip.
Alberta cities are full of energy, innovative people, bold ideas, and a drive to succeed. But our future is being shaped by leaders in Ottawa who don't live here and don't understand our culture. We've been held back by policies that handcuff our economy, punish our industries, and dismiss our potential. The Alberta Republican Party believes in independence because decisions about Alberta's future should be made here, not by the Laurentian elite.
That doesn't sound like an extreme message to me. That sounds like perfectly common sense, but I don't know the ins and outs of all of these characters. So Kian Bexty on X wrote this in response to that clip. He wrote, public service announcement, Cam Davis is an American who used to work for the BC Liberals, trying to stop John Rudstad's conservative surge. After Danielle Smith refused to hire him in her government, he began plotting. I fully believe that he launched this joke of a party to help Naheed Nenshi get elected. And that, of course, is the NDP leader. Keith Wilson, a constitutional lawyer who was also on a show I mentioned last week, he writes this. He says, if you want Alberta independence to succeed, please give this political party a pass. This party weakens our chances of achieving independence for our kids. So what do you make of all this, Wyatt?
And I know Cam Davies, and I don't mind the guy. The guy is actually a very good marketer. At the very least, he's good at political communications, which is his sort of background. And I would generally agree with Keith Wilson. The only thing I would disagree with him is, as I really don't think that if you pass the Republican Party and you find a new vehicle, if that vehicle is going to succeed either. What we always see with the separatist movement in Alberta is that it very quickly devolves into utopianism, where everyone starts trying to debate what version of independent Alberta they want well before they even have the support to even come close, even get more than 25% of the vote in a referendum. And so everything splits up because people have disagreements on whether it should be the 51st state or whether we should be independent and if we should only leave if we also get Saskatchewan too. It's one of these things where I think that the idea oftentimes gets going when people are highly emotional, and it seems like a great idea at the time, because right now it's probably a high watermark in Alberta for support for separatism, and that's even with 58% of people being against it, and only in like the mid 30s in favor of it, with a lot of people who, of course, still just don't have an opinion or don't know. This is high watermark. This people are emotional. In 1 year's time, especially if like sorry to point out to people, but if Mark Carney lowers taxes even a little bit, people will be like, oh, life's not as bad. Like, it's still not very good, but people tend to have a high degree of an ability to kind of forget about issues, especially that take a lot of work to accomplish. People tend to forget when things even get a little bit better.
I mean, I could play the opposite side of that coin, though, Wyatt. Like, what happens if we get plunged into a recession? What happens if we can't sell our debt on a bond market and the loonie starts spiraling? I mean, things could go really the other way here. I mean, Canada's in a dangerous spot. You posted a video where you said that Liberals want separatism to spread, to divide Canadians, and that you think this is all good for Mark Carney. But what happens if the economy crashes? And maybe explain to folks why you think that Mark Carney wants this separatist movement to spread.
I think there is a low ceiling for how much support the separatist movement can get, even if, bond markets crash and the dollar devalues heavily. I think there's just a lot of people who is just a no-go for them. Retirees in Calgary are the people who would absolutely destroy the referendum, because you'd be having to win the rural areas like 90-10 to offset losing it massively in Edmonton and Calgary. Again, we're having, when in provincial elections, it's close between the UCP and the NDP, which is a far easier choice to make in favor of the UCP, in the sense it's a fiscally conservative party and we're going to be trying to, stabilize the economy and lower tax and all this stuff. And it's still difficult to get people to show up and vote for that against the trade unionist NDP. Now the NDP in the next election, this is why Carney and Naheed Nenshi and Carla Beck like this in Alberta and Saskatchewan, is because they get to run on, let's be pro-Canadian, let's keep Canada together. They can ignore all their stupid socialist policies and they can make themselves the party of Canada, and then Danielle Smith has to be the party enabling the separatist takeover of Alberta.
No, that's so true. Interesting. Okay, well, Wyatt, we're going to have to keep that topic in mind and keep watching it, have you back on. There was a story I wanted to get to yesterday, but we didn't have time, so I'm going to go through it today, which is that this riding in Quebec, Terrebonne, in suburban Montreal, Elections Canada's called it, is going to the Liberals despite all of the shenanigans that we have been walking the audience through. So recall this, that on election night, this is according to CBC reporting, Terrebonne initially went to the Liberal MP by 35 votes. But after the standard validation process, the result flipped to the incumbent Bloc Québécois MP by 44 votes. Yes, it swung by 79 votes somehow. And then this triggered an automatic judicial recount. When the judicial recount happened, it went to the Liberals by one single solitary vote, only to have a woman come forth from the Bloc saying, I voted for the Bloc, but Elections Canada didn't get my vote because Elections Canada made a mistake with the return envelope. She had a copy of it in her hand. Just an unbelievable chain of events that went on there. Well, the National Post is reporting that the vote in Terrebonne riding is the final vote, despite the uncounted mail-in ballot that would make it a tie, according to Elections Canada. And so Elections Canada said that they will be reviewing the special ballot system after this returned mail-in ballot, but that as far as this election result, it is final. It is final. So too bad. And the Liberal is going to get to be the MP. What do you make of it, Wyatt?
Well, and Elections Canada, I'm pretty sure they even acknowledged that they screwed up with the wrong address on the envelopes. Like, so apparently that we're just going by the rule of, well, what's one vote between friends when the Liberals need to win? I think any reasonable person would look at this and say, hey, it's it's pretty hazy on who won here. I don't think that we're going to be able to squint and really say decisively it's one way or the other. They should probably be having a by-election. And good thing that it seems like Francois Blanchet's not going to take this lying down. And I think he has a press conference scheduled to address this issue because you shouldn't just accept this. And with so many liberals wondering why or attacking, usually it's not major figures, but it's usually people online who are saying the election's rigged and whatnot. It's not. But when you have stupidity like this happening in individual ridings like Terrebonne, and you have 800 special ballots being kept in a box and left uncounted in British Columbia, it's like, oh, can you not understand why people might think that these mistakes are not just mistakes and it's like intentional? I don't think it's intentional, but incompetence is quite a strong drug.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both in this situation, if you ask me. Well, I don't want to move on because there's a topic that I used to cover a lot, which is immigration and refugees. And this story really popped out. It's an American story, but I'm going to tie it back to Canada as well. So earlier this week, we saw that the United States has fast-tracked a group of refugees that have arrived in the United States. The Trump administration welcomed 59 white South Africans as refugees, saying they face discrimination and violence at home, which the country's government strongly denies. And so it's kind of just become an interesting spectacle on social media, especially. Here's the account End Wokeness saying women and children, fathers who have stable jobs, not one single gang tattoo. Everyone is waving an American flag. The only refugees the left hates. And it does seem, at least from social media and the response, that the left does hate this group of refugees. Here is a left-wing account on X saying South African refugees, in scare quotes there, arriving in the U.S. looking like they haven't struggled a day in their life. And so again, the response has really been wild. Here's another one from End Wokeness saying TikTok influencers issues a direct threat to the 59 white refugees, saying that Black people will be hunting them down. I believe we have part of this clip basically just saying that white people shouldn't be allowed to be refugees in the United States. Let's play the clip.
This is for the South Africans who are going to be entering the United States. This is just a public service announcement. I just wanted to make you aware that the Black people who were students during apartheid, we're grandmas and grandpas now, and we have the ear of Gen Z. One more thing. I also want to let you know that our president, he has Secret Service, and you will not.
Yikes. Okay, so pretty strong words there. I don't know. I don't like any of this stuff, Wyatt. I think that from, my cursory knowledge of South Africa, I don't know the country very well. I have visited, I was actually a student down there, and I've done the whole, I visited Robben Island and understand the history of apartheid. However, it is pretty clear that things are not going very well for the white South Africans, that a lot of them are getting hunted down and killed, that their farms are being invaded, and that there is targeted crime against them. Recall the ANC, the Nationalist Party that's in power there, which was Nelson Mandela's party, has gone down a pretty dark path. They sort of openly have these chants, these anti-apartheid chants that include things like kill the Boer and kill white. We've heard it, we've seen it. Terrifying footage of entire stadiums full of people chanting this kind of stuff. I wouldn't feel safe there. I don't begrudge people for wanting to have a better life. That's the whole purpose of the refugee program, is to allow people to come and have a better life in Canada or the United States. And if they're patriotic and they love America and they're happy to be there, all the better. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, I do just want to clarify. I don't think it's the ANC party who was engaging the kill the Boer chants, but that was a left wing almost ally of the ANC where they'll never condemn them, and they kind of end up providing the anti-white kind of muscle within South Africa, the people who push the policies that then justifies the ANC doing what they want because they'll take the more moderate middle road approach. But it's just the slightly less insanely racist approach that that other party would want them to take.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. Thank you for making that clarification. The ANC does defend this song, though. Here is a report from Reuters saying South Africans ANCs defend the Kill the War song. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so they're the enablers. It's almost like that other party ends up being the Black Bloc Antifa to their kind of progressive downtown Portland Democrat elected officials. It's kind of that relationship going on. They're the official government, and then there's this other crazy party that they'll kind of let go and do the dirty work of what they would like to do, but they're too busy, like they're wearing suits and ties, so they can engage in that sort of thing. And with that one lady in that TikTok video too, it's like, who could guess why people are donating to Carmelo Anthony for like stabbing that Metcalf boy to death. There's so many people out there who thrive and live off of resentment, and that is what is basically just fueling the opposition to these people moving to the United States. Oh, they don't look like they're starving. Well, I don't think you need to be starving for someone to want to kill you in a country, and it's no longer safe. And if you call the police, they're not going to show up in time. And yes, they kill farmers in South Africa of both races, but they say it's very clear when they kill a white farmer, just based on the crime scene evidence alone, it was probably racial, in at least in some elements of it. And so these people have a very good reason to leave, but people just cannot stand that something bad could happen to somebody who's not in their politically favored identity group. It's almost like, racism's a bad thing, but if you're on the woke left, you think it's actually perfectly fine because you see everything as just being oppressor and oppressed power games. And so these people should maybe be killed. These people maybe should get, attacked in America because I guess they existed when apartheid existed. These people only think in terms of group. All they think is in terms of group because they are fundamentally racists.
It reminds me of that Ryan Long. Ryan Long's a Canadian comedian. He did this really funny skit, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, where he was talking about how like the woke and the racists kind of agree on everything. And he had there was like two guys, and one was really woke and one was really racist. And they actually agree. And that kind of what it reminds me of, like white people can't be refugees. They just can't, right? And like that idea in and of itself is quite inherently racist, right? They're saying that white people have power innately, and therefore they can't be victimized. Which, what is that really saying about white people? I mean, it's so disturbing.
Well, and it's not even woke versus racist. It's woke versus woke. It's the woke left and it's the woke right. People who just invert where they think that the algorithm of who's right and wrong should kind of move in the direction of. And I'm anti-algorithmic thinking. Every single individual is an individual, and you should always take things as a case by case basis.
Well, I said I wanted to tie it back to Canada because I think that there is a tie here in a couple of different ways. So this is Juno News reporting, and Noah Jarvis from True North had this incredible exclusive Fed support immigration ad blitz promoting anti-Canada, pro-DEI views. So these ads, I guess, showed up all over bus stops in Victoria. And what do? They highlight individual migrants to hear their stories, individual immigrants and refugees that live in Canada. You can see by this board that they are funded by the government of Canada. So there's a picture of a woman that says, "I'm more than the migrant you had in mind." And then when you go to their individual stories, you have this like total like hatred of Canada. So I'll just read this woman who she says she's a citizen of Jordan, originally from Palestine. And it says, "Here I am, someone whose family has been displaced because of colonialism and imperialism. Yet I am here on these territories where I wasn't invited. I didn't go through the elders. I didn't go through Indigenous peoples. I went through basically their colonizer system. I found myself here as someone who's had similar background experiences where my grandparents were forced to leave during the Nakba in 1948. The Nakba, for people who don't know, is they call it the catastrophe when the Jews got their own country. They consider that a catastrophe. And they call it ethnic cleansing, even though it was basically a partition where the Jews moved to one side and the Arabs moved to the other side. And they always talk about the fact that the Arabs were moved, and they never talk about the fact that the Jews were also moved. Anyway, She writes that I felt an enormous sense of guilt. So basically, just saying that Canada's not a legitimate country, that we're just colonizers. She went through the colonizer system, and that really she should have gone through the elders to come to Canada. So kind of discrediting the entire notion of Canada. There's another one here, which is this other woman from Turkey who's part of the LGBT community. So she's a gay refugee from Turkey. Rather than being grateful and appreciative to be here in Canada, she just kind of like slams Canada for being not as open to LG people as she presumed that they might have been. So this is what the government of Canada does. They find people who hate our country, and then they promote them to like shove it down our throats and say like these are the people that we should be welcoming and celebrating. Yeah, I would honestly, like, these kind of people into our country who have like no sense of gratitude and don't want to be here and don't even recognize Canada as a legitimate country. Like, there's the door. You can leave if you hate it that much here and you're so disillusioned by how horrible it is here. Feel free to leave. What do you think, Wyatt?
And this is why, on top of wanting the immigration rate for permanent residents lowered to 100,000 per year, I'd also, on top of that, want it so that we have values tests. And if we detect that somebody doesn't actually like our country, is resentful towards our country, but is trying to move here, you can leave. I don't want people who don't want to be team players moving into Canada. If you're only moving to, if you don't want to be a Canadian, you can not be a Canadian. And the thing is that we're going to give you your wish and you can go back home because apparently our country's so racist and horrible and everything here is just like, homophobic, xenophobic, whatever. Apparently we're xenophobic at the same time we let so many people enter the country every single year without even just asking them to barely sign the guest book.
100%. One more story I wanted to highlight here, which is that this is another one from Juno News. Alex Zoltan from True North writes that BC has temporarily banned non-Indigenous people from visiting a provincial park. So under the NDP, the government has banned non-Indigenous Canadians from accessing Joffre Lakes Provincial Park. It's off limits to visitors starting on April 26th, so the First Nations can have a ceremony. What do you make of this, Wyatt?
It's just the reconciliation industry run amok. It's just basically every single thing that's going on in BC right now, when it comes to band councils, when it comes to reserve land, when it comes to historical territory, it's all basically a slow march towards allowing band councils to control all property. This is basically a power move. It's silly. They're doing this because a whale washed up on the beach, and apparently this means that only Indigenous people can be on the beach now for some ceremony. It's all about trying to slowly dig away at the property rights of other British Columbians. And guess what? It's not even good for Indigenous people because Indigenous people in British Columbia don't have individual rights. They have collective rights. That's why on Haida there was a couple families had their houses bulldozed because they had an association with someone who was selling drugs. They were just related to them. And they don't have individual rights. It's not their house. It's the band council's house. So they can bulldoze the house and the government doesn't show up to arrest anyone or do anything about it. We have this going on everywhere, that band councils and all these treaty rights, all these like basically this control they have over the land is deemed like a absolute special right that can never be violated. And I think this whale beach story is just a microcosm of how ridiculous it's gotten. You can't even be on the beach at the same time. Well, if you can't be on the beach at the same time a dead whale's there, you're definitely never going to get a resource project through.
That's 100% true. I mean, I just think you're getting into very dicey territory where you say that based on the color of your skin and based on your ethnicity, you can or cannot enter government land. Like, I don't want any government agent policing what race someone is when they try to enter government building or crown land. I mean, it's really heading down a dark and dangerous path under the guise of progressivism. And you mentioned that example from Haida. We still call it Queen Charlotte Islands, but it's just sort of scary, collectivism run amok.
And the thing is that it actually crosses party lines in British Columbia. You get the BC NDP, the BC Greens, who I call the farmers market communists, and you also have the BC Conservatives, who will all engage at different times in this kind of like performative. Well, we need to respect land title and we need to respect the consultation process for getting projects through. Right now, we have debates where the BC Conservatives are trying to outwoke the NDP because the NDP aren't respecting consultations enough. It's like, guys, just shut down the province at this point. If we don't have the confidence in ourselves to do anything, then let's just pack it in. Just call it Turtle Island Province and then leave, because this is obviously we're not going to get anything done here if we can't treat everyone as an individual and an adult who actually has to live in the real world. We let pan councils basically live in a different world, and that we must now respect the rules and regulations they make up on the spot.
It's so unbelievable, such a scary direction, and sad to see that the BC Conservatives are engaging in that kind of thing, because the whole point of an opposition is to impose this kind of thing, and I know a whole bunch of people in British Columbia don't like this stuff, and they don't agree with it. They should have their voices heard and represented too. Wyatt Claypool, thanks so much for joining us. I always appreciate your time and your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back again on Monday with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.
You're watching Juno News, Canada's fastest growing independent news network. Our team works day and night to bring you nationwide coverage of the issues that matter. Honest reporting of the stories that put Canadians first. From far and wide, Juno is doing the work to turn the dial in the right direction, bringing you the news from the field and in the studio. Wherever it takes us, we get the job done. For you, for Canada. Subscribe today and help us replace the CBC. Go to junonews.com to join the fight.